I lived in a beach town, and you got everywhere on your bike. Like the town was safe enough to ride your bike for, I don't know. I could ride like 16, 17 miles and still be relatively on like 25 mile an hour safe streets. And that's kind of like the benefit of being on these slow streets is like you could just go wherever you want. So I'd go down to all these towns, and it was super freeing to be like in this place that I've never been before, and my mom would never ever drive me to. Just go. You probably just go to the arcade. I probably didn't do
Oh
anything
yeah.
other than go to the arcade, but it was
Oh my
really
God.
interesting being in those places.
You're so lucky you had a fucking arcade. You know, I would have killed to have an arcade. We did not have a single arcade within striking distance of where I grew up. I know that's not important, but like, my God, the closest thing we got was there was a Dig Dug Pac-Man machine in the local hot dog restaurant. They mostly had hot dogs. They had sandwiches, dogs, burgers, breakfast. But anyways, they had a Dig Dug machine. That's it. You know,
Yeah, yeah. Like we had like every single restaurant we had like arcade machines. I don't know. I think we had like 6 or 7 arcades around us, or at least that I could bike to. One of the best memories I share with some of my friends was we called the all water route to this place called Ray's Digital Nexus, and this was an internet cafe, and we would all ride our bikes to the internet cafe, and because he had like really great graphics card, we'd all play like Counter Strike Source or whatever, or no, this is before Source. We'd all play like Counter Strike like 1.6.
oh
But the
my
all water
God.
route, which is the important part of the story, is I printed out a map on MapQuest, and I traced out, and we followed the river, and we were like, oh yeah, this is gonna be the greatest way to go. And I was like, I got this, guys. We're taking the all water route, like Lewis and Clark. And we rode our bikes like this 15 miles to this place in the middle of like suburban hell. It was not a place that you should be riding your bike to. But it's a one. It's like we all talk about it. We're like, oh yeah, Mike, you remember the all water route? Yeah.
Oh God. Okay, yeah, no, now I'm getting a picture. I'm gonna glaze over the fact that you used MapQuest.
Looking for the button that says record, first episode ever, and there's a very
Yeah,
large red icon in a giant gray screen. I don't know how I missed that.
even I can see it, and I'm not looking at your computer. I'm many thousands of miles away.
So that voice you're hearing is Nick.
Hey guys,
I'm Mike. I am the urban Jersey guy.
and I have a channel called the Rural Urbanist.
No, you are the rural urbanist. You don't
Ah,
have a
fuck. Yeah, you're
channel
right. You
called
know,
the rural urbanist.
I don't have a channel. I just am the Rural Urbanist.
Embody it. It is your life
I
now.
don't even know what that means. It just sounds cool, so that's what I am. And I'm coming to you from Germany, sitting in a awful, awful 100 euro a week renovated old person's home.
I've never been in a place that was less than $40 a night, so I cannot imagine how bad a €100 a week place could be. Because the place I stayed in that was $100 a night or $40 a night was literally a roadside roach motel.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and to be more specific, yes, 13 euros per night. So we have two segments, and the first one is going to be going over two news stories that are rather recent. One will be a national or international story, and the other will be a local story related to urban planning.
News segment still unnamed.
So the first story is NASA goes to space as a culmination of, I think, almost 15 to 20 years of construction, research, development of the SLS, the Space Launch System. NASA has finally launched the SLS as part of the Artemis mission, which will return humans to the moon, supposedly, by the year 2025. And it didn't blow up. Surprisingly, honestly, I was giving it about, I don't know, like a 50-50 chance. And one of the things that I've heard a lot about this project is that it's expensive, it's over budget, and that it is a complete waste of money. And one of the things I want to talk about in relation to this is that just because you spend a lot of money on
So it's like, why What is the like total? What is the total goal of going to the moon? Like we did it before, and I know this is kind of like the argument that comes up. Why do we go to space?
Yeah, so I think the main reason that's being given with this particular mission is that we want to go to the moon and we want to go there to stay. So it was, in at least the opinion of this mission, the Artemis mission, a mistake to have left the moon in the first place. So the idea is we go, and after a few missions, we begin the process of setting up a permanent base and possibly eventually using the moon as a launch pad to get us to Mars. But I think the other reason for going to space, it really does, there's the science and exploration, there's the, yeah, let's go to Mars reason, but I'm kind of suspicious that the part of the reason behind this, I don't know what you think, Mike, but like, is that it also has a lot to do with inspiring people on Earth and also as part of being a kind of a government jobs program, sort of being a version of universal
Yeah,
basic income.
like having lofty goals is like very important to actually getting anything done. It's like you kind of like literally that's why they call it a moonshot. You do something that's incredibly hard and then you try to get it done. It's like having these goals that are set so hard are very important for like to prove the government can actually still do these very hard things.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think it's part of inspiring people and it's part of supporting people in places like, I mean, a lot of the development for this rocket was in, I believe, Alabama or one of the other southern states and in very economically repressed communities. And so one argument is that, yeah, they're taking all this money and wasting it on this rocket, but you have to think that money's not getting burned in the engines. It's going to that town in Alabama where they do the final assembly, or it's going to the mission controllers in Texas or Florida. It's the money isn't getting wasted per se. And I think we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but the main reason I wanted to talk about this was that it serves as kind of a good foil for any infrastructure projects that are existing out there. Like, what was the example that we talked about before the show?
Casher, California High Speed Rail.
Cash. What
It
the
it is.
casher?
It did.
I've never heard
Wait,
anybody call it
does
that.
anyone say the acronym?
No, I don't. Oh,
I think
Jesus.
we should make it a thing.
Casher. I don't know, man. I'm not.
Is that wait? Is that how like CAHSR casher? Yeah, it's casher. Why not?
I don't know. Not feeling it. Not feeling it. But
Well, we'll have to workshop it. We're neither of us are from California, so it's fine.
yeah, no. People from California, let us know. Do you say casher? Casher. So yeah, I mean, this really is a good foil for it because I don't know. I don't know what the budget. I probably should have looked that up beforehand. What the budget current spend is on California high speed rail casher, but
I think the it's supposed to be like 500 billion
yeah, and I mean that
when
number
it's
that is
finished.
yeah something like that. I don't know. We can edit this in post and just have flashing red letters.
I think the original budget was something like 100 billion. But that also brings into like a good point. It's like it's weird when the one of the differences between like comparing California high speed rail to NASA is people don't vote on NASA. The government just is
Yeah,
like we're gonna go to the moon. Like
yeah.
some scientist, at Lawrence Livermore Lab or whatever, they're literally just like these are our goals and we're gonna meet them and then it gets done. Where with like California high
Oh
speed
my God,
rail,
could
it was
you
like we're
imagine?
voting on the route. Oh
No,
yeah,
but yeah,
have the people vote.
no, you know where I'm going with this. Could you fucking imagine if people voted on exactly what NASA should do? Like, if the vote was like between the destination of where the Artemis mission should go to or something like, oh my God, that'd be ridiculous. I mean, people would be voting to go to I don't know, planet X or something.
There's like a 99% chance it would be going to Uranus, and it would be called like the 420 rocket.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. So NASA should not be put to a vote, but I'm optimistically happy that California high speed rail was because the voters approved it. And the thing is, now that the voters have approved it, the way that the California legal system works, it is very, very difficult to unapprove it. So,
Yeah, they have binding. What do they call them?
binding resolution.
Binding resolutions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and California high speed rail. I think there's been so much controversy around it that people forget there is, of course, the original goal to eventually connect San Francisco, Los Angeles, and probably San Diego with a cohesive and high speed rail network. So, and I think that people forget that this is connecting all those cities in the Central Valley, which honestly, from what I understand, are fairly economically repressed and which have for a long time suffered from lack of investment by the government in Sacramento. I'm really, really very optimistic, not only that this project being completed will help those places, but also that the actual construction of this project, just like the actual building of a rocket helps the community it's in, the construction of this railroad will help the construction workers and the people living there.
And it's like, I believe it's 3 million people, which is like larger than a vast number of states in the Central Valley, along with like people will complain about things like, oh, it's being built in roughly the middle of nowhere. It's like 3 million people. Like there's countries in Europe with high speed rail lines that are only like 6 million people. And the Central
Yeah.
Valley alone has 3 million people. And it's
Yeah,
also
yeah.
connecting to cities that are.
People forget that. I mean, really, like what you said with 3 million is a lot larger than a lot of US states. I mean, the state I grew up in, New Hampshire, is about 1.3 million people, and I mean Vermont is I think around 500,000. And Vermont has I think personally better rail connections than a lot of these places in California do. So
I was surprised. Like people talk about like, oh, it's like, oh, we should get rid of Ethan Allen Express, which is the Vermont Amtrak train, and it's like the Ethan Allen Express gets like each train gets basically full, which is surprising for a very rural place. Like it was something like hundreds of people per week, which is not
yeah,
something that you
yeah.
get in places in
No,
the
no,
center of America that are less rural.
Vermont loves Vermont loves its rail system. Like they, it's funny. Growing up in New England, and I don't know how it is down in New Jersey, but the train connections that we do have seem to be very near and dear to the hearts of the people that live there and that grew up there. It's almost like they become almost storied in a way. Like, and I know that sounds kind of, I don't know, that sounds kind of kooky or whatever, but I mean it's true. Like the Downeaster is a great train, and it honestly has changed like my life because it gave me like a visual reference, something that I could experience with rail travel. Where if I grew up in somewhere like middle of nowhere, Nebraska, I probably wouldn't have had that. I wouldn't have been able to see like what the potential of even moderate rail is.
Yeah, it's like my formative years were spent in a small beach town in New Jersey. So I was like right next to the coastline. And it was this kind of thing, like it was omnipresent, like you heard the train horns like every weekend, and it was like kind of a thing that made you feel like you were connected to the city. And then when you were old enough, you could just like hop on the train, like without your parents even knowing, and just like go to the city. It was like a 2.5 hour journey.
It's so easy, and exactly what you said. That's exactly right. I mean, you that's the thing. You have these connections that take you from a place where lots of things are happening, like a city, to somewhere, a small town where not a lot is happening and where people don't always have, they can leave and find other opportunities because of this thing that passes through their community. It's, they don't have to have, the thousands of dollars that it takes to own and operate and maintain a car. They can have this hope of just a transit line running through their town, and they can live somewhere that's cheaper outside of the city, and then they can commute to the city. I mean, that's how it's supposed to work. That's our ideal world. It doesn't always work like that. You can tell me what the fares are in New Jersey. I don't know if they're well priced.
I when I was a kid, I don't know, maybe it was like $15 to go to New Jersey, or if you go from New York, from my coastal town to New York City, just not bad.
It's not bad. Yeah, I mean, I think actually the Downeaster has gotten pretty expensive. So like in my experience, I think growing up it was about 15, which back when gas prices were cheaper really didn't feel like a great deal. Now it's closer to 20, but it still actually feels like a better deal. But I think as another thing which often gets forgotten about is that people don't consider all of the costs of car operation ownership. They only think about gas. They forget the maintenance, they forget the insurance, the liability, depreciation.
And it's like when you build that train line, it's like every single thing is in that like full price tag. It's like there's your rolling stock, which is your cars. There is your rail line, which is your roads. Where there is your electrification, which is your power. And it's like it's all there, and like the operating costs are actually fairly low. People will grumble and mumble about operation costs, but like when you have 80 to a few hundred people on a train, those become to be like basically nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the US, and I think this has just been a wider spread problem for the US, is that when you have, we forget, we see upfront costs for things, and we forget that sometimes you need to spend money to save money. Honestly, things have an upfront cost, and I don't know. This is an example, a story uh, from my dad. So we were looking at a car back in, because I went to university out in Arizona, and out there you need a car, and I didn't have enough money for a car myself. My dad and I went looking for a car together. Now, my dad, being the massive cheap ass that he is, decided that we would find the cheapest stick shift car that we could find. We went around and around Phoenix looking for cars, and eventually we pulled up to this car lot in a not so great part of Phoenix. I think it was on Camelback. We roll into the
I
dealership.
remember Camelback being a nice neighborhood. That's weird because I
It's
that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, you're gonna have to fact check me on the street later. It was not the best area wherever we were. That's the thing about Phoenix too. Some of those roads are so long; they go through
Oh yeah,
many different
yeah.
neighborhoods.
I was just thinking, yeah, like Camelback is like a 7 mile long road. I'm thinking of like the
Yeah,
part of Camelback that I was on.
yeah. God, no, no. Phoenix is a fucking nightmare, really. But
Yeah.
we pull into this dealership, right? We park our little rental Hyundai, and we go and start talking to these men and say we're there to look at a car that we saw online. And they start speaking to us with Russian accents. And it turns out my dad had found a fucking car offer online from a dealership run by Hasidic Russian Jews in Phoenix, Arizona. So we buy this car, right? I think it was decently under 5,000, which is pretty cheap for a used car. I mean, especially it was a BMW, and
Oh,
like
there was your first mistake.
I
You got a
know,
German used car
I know. Yeah,
from the
in
Russian
hindsight,
mob.
not. Yes, the Russian Jewish mob. We buy this car. It does not take long to start finding mechanical problems and plastic problems with the vehicle. Things are breaking off of it. And I mean, I would say by the end of college, probably spent well over $1,000 in repairs on that car.
Yeah, I went only through like shitty used cars when I was in college, and my first car was a Buick LeSabre from 1996, Uh,
Hmm.
it was this car. Okay, so this car was 14 years old when I got it. So
Hmm.
it was on its last legs, and I put in a quart of oil every 2 weeks. A quart of
Oh
oil
God.
would be left on the a quart of oil would be left on the ground, and then I would go and buy a quart of oil and I would pour it in, and then that quart of oil would be left on the ground.
Oh God.
And each quart of oil would cost me like $6 or $7 as it destroyed the
Oh,
environment.
Je-
Um, and then it burned oil as well.
Jesus. What? But man, let me just say, old Buicks are tanks. I don't know.
The thing about that, like, it was like every single car that I got for cheap ended up costing me a lot of money. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, and that applies, to loop it back in. It applies to infrastructure. It applies to most things in life.
if you don't electrify your train line, like if you have a very frequent train line, you don't electrify it, you're gonna be paying out the ass for diesel. It's
Yeah,
like if you don't actually build the your segments for higher speed travel, even though you know you're going to need higher speed travel in the future, well, you're going to be rebuilding the whole goddamn train line for higher speed travel in the future.
yeah. Well, that reminds me. I mean, yeah, it'll happen eventually. That's what most people don't realize. Like, I was talking to one of the weirder connections I have. I cold called the guy that was instrumental in getting the Downeaster, our local rail service in New England, in making that happen. Weirdly enough, he called me back. So we have ended up having a few phone conversations. And one of the things that he told me was he had a meeting at one point with, I don't remember which head of Amtrak it was, but he said that the head of Amtrak said there are enough Amtrak trains crawling across the country at whatever, 55 or 65 miles per hour. I want you to push with this route for welded rail and 79 miles an hour. And you know what? They pushed for it and they got it. I don't know exactly how, but they got it. And it's ended up being one of the reasons, those higher speeds, which they have through most of that system now, are one of the reasons why the Downeaster is so successful because they're actually able to compete with I-95.
Yeah. And it's like it's not too much of a technical advancement to get up to 79 miles an hour, where like the difference between like 79 and 150 is like huge, where the difference between like sub 79 and getting up to 79 is like significantly less. It's still conventional rail, just done at like a higher precision essentially.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. And yeah, there is a lot more engineering. The next news article that we want to talk about today is a local urban planning article from the city of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So the article that we're going to be looking at, well, it's actually a series of articles in Seacoast Online, which is what serves as our oddly capable local paper. It talks about the redevelopment project for the Thomas J. McIntyre Federal Building, a building which is placed right in the middle of downtown and which kind of broke the neighborhood. It's not the worst example of urban renewal that I can think of.
This is not like a normal shaped building in this neighborhood. It clearly looks like they tore down a lot. And you were saying there was some type of urban renewal process that happened at this time.
So I guess before we jump into the article, and I think we should briefly, because my God, I could talk about Portsmouth for a very long time. So Portsmouth, New Hampshire is somewhere which has, as I heard it described in one news article, preserved by poverty. In the case of Portsmouth, what this means is that almost the entire downtown and most of the original buildings around the original Old Town have been preserved. While there were urban renewal projects in the town, most of that was actually not the old mixed use, multi story buildings. Most of that was houses, just normal houses from the 17 and 1600s and as late as the 1800s. And most of that urban renewal took place in the North End. And so, yeah, a lot of that area was destroyed. And actually, what ended up happening was that the area directly to the north of the downtown had at one point been turned into a mall, which was never really very successful. It basically, I can't remember the name of it, but it basically ended up being just the headquarters for a local heating oil company, and there was an A&P supermarket, if I'm remembering correctly. And that's it. After years of this kind of languishing, the town had grown very poor, but they didn't even really have the money to tear down the old buildings in the center. What this has led to in Portsmouth is a sort of, mm, I almost want to call it positive NIMBYism. Um, I don't know if that's a term you've ever heard before, Mike. Positive NIMBYism.
I definitely heard like where you have a lot of preservationists who are just like never change anything ever, and then once you get around actually being able to fix things up, it's like, oh, that's just kind of nice now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, there is a lot of historical preservation in this city. Actually, the view that we're looking at right now is from Market Square, looking down Market Street. None of these buildings have changed or been replaced in the past 200 years. Most of these are early 1800s to mid 1800s buildings. And I mean, even if you look at this jewelry store here, it's the same jewelry store with the same sign that was there in 1914. It's really been preserved. That's why when time came around to, for example, replace the mall, the residents wanted that it was replaced with something which was like what they were used to, like what they grew up with. They wanted mixed use, they wanted walkable, and they wanted it to be part of the community. But that's how we ended up with these buildings here. And I don't know, tell me what you think of these.
Yeah, it's like mostly four-story mixed use. I do like the daylighting that they did with the curbs, where they bump them out a little bit, so pedestrians don't get hit. You can actually walk a little bit farther into the intersection before you're actually in the intersection. I think
Yeah,
they're also
actually, I
called
didn't
bulb
even
outs, but yeah,
holdouts. Yeah.
yeah, and they also they planted street trees all the way down.
Yes, yeah, that's something that the city is trying to do because it currently doesn't have ignore the parking garage. But that's currently something that the city doesn't have throughout, which they're trying to change.
And also, like ideally, it looks like there's probably a lot of housing there. It's like that those many floors and stuff like that. It's probably hundreds of people living there.
I wish that is actually one minor point which I want to talk about. Some of this is hotel space. That's better than nothing. In the future, it could be apartments, but right now it's hotel. Needless to say, Portsmouth has kind of, as they've filled in the few buildings which burned down, the parking lots, the built areas which became parking lots, they eventually, so I don't know the total story of this federal building, but it is definitely an odd shape and it took almost a complete city block. This building also for quite some time has not really been fully utilized by the federal government. I don't know exactly what was in the building. It's about 4 stories tall. I mean, it could have been the FBI, could have been the CIA, the NSA, the IRS.
You're saying the CIA is going to be in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Yes, because,
What kind of intelligence work needs to get done in Portsmouth, New Hampshire?
well, let me tell you, it is exactly the place where you would least expect them. And that's why there's no specific threat. They're just there to be contrarian. Anyways, okay, honestly, it was probably the IRS. Let's be real. It's fucking New Hampshire. Nothing happens in New Hampshire. All of that said, the gist of the article which we were looking at is that essentially there's a program from the GSA and from the federal government where cities can have the space or use of federal buildings in some way turned over to the city to promote the betterment of the city, to sort of undo the urban renewal, the disconnection of downtowns that a lot of federal buildings from this period caused. The federal building itself also hosted a post office. This post office had a rather large parking lot to the rear, also a rather large loading dock. The combination of these two things really have disconnected the waterfront from this kind of neighborhood, which leads over to the area known as Prescott Park and the Memorial Bridge, which has been pretty heavily redeveloped in recent years. The plans for this redevelopment, they're surprisingly good. I'm always shocked the way that the city's talking about this redevelopment project is that they really want to reintegrate this current dead space back into the city. And so this involves a few different steps. First is they want to renovate the existing four-story federal building, make it look a little prettier, make it look a little nicer, and they want to make it so that the bottom floor, which is currently, I believe, part of the post office or just a lobby, they want to make that mixed use commercial. I don't know what the upstairs is going to be, but then the most exciting part, they want to build a market shed. Market sheds are really not something which we have a ton of examples of left in the US.
Yeah, like I believe everywhere in the US like every single city would have a market, and I like sometimes they were actually built by the city as well where you could just pedal as needed.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe the original location of the market in the city was actually Market Square. They specifically, if I remember correctly, did not have so much of a organized marketplace as a city like Boston might have and still has to this day, like Faneuil Hall or Boston Public Market. But now that that sort of thing is more appreciated, like we see more demand for it. There is this beautiful rendering here where they've taken the parking lot and essentially turned it into a sort of pedestrian street, which will eventually connect with a new pedestrian mall that's going to lead to another indoor market, which is currently under construction. I think this is a real opportunity for this to be a huge destination for people from all over New England.
I could imagine wanting to be in like a neighborhood like Portsmouth. Now I understand what you mean by like the NIMBYism like kind of saved a lot of like the character of the neighborhood. Where like I can imagine just going there, it's like, oh, I go to the old town and then I like wander over to this like new market district that is just getting built and like there's all these like peddlers and all these shops.
Yeah, and as I think about it, the thing that draws me to a place is I'm drawn to a place by architecture. I'm drawn to a place by there being things to do, and I'm drawn to a place just because it has a good feeling. It's comfortable to be in. When I look at the renderings for this beautiful market shed, it takes me back in time, and it wouldn't really be too hard for me to imagine what it was like to live in this city 100 years ago. And I know that's maybe not the main purpose of it, but the US has lost so many beautiful, irreplaceable buildings and pieces of architecture that I'm just happy that we're finally starting to build things which maybe can at least compete with what we've lost. Maybe to like 0.5% of what's been lost. I don't know. It's encouraging. It's nice to have encouraging stories for once. All right, so that concludes our segment on the news. Now, what we want to do with this second segment is just kind of have a prompt and then we'll have a conversation about it. The first thing that I've written down here is walking is why we're not fat, and biking too. I think both of us, I mean, now that we've seen each other on video call here, we're both, I'd say, reasonably average looking people who are not overweight, as far as I can tell. I think when we were talking before, when we were kind of planning what we wanted to do with this, we both realized that both of us are in the health that we are because we walk a lot. You've kind of said that walking and biking is why you've managed not to get fat. And unfortunately for me, for a good part of the time that I was growing up, and it kind of peaked in college, I was decently overweight. I was probably about 25 to 35 pounds overweight. The thing was for me, I didn't have a lot of those opportunities of places to bike or walk. We grew up in a cul-de-sac, pretty, it was built on an old farm from the 1600s, and the original farmhouse was there, and then all of our other 1970s, 80s houses. So from there, was only one place that we could bike to. It was a local farm stand, and it was about a 1 minute bike away. But outside of that, you know, for me, I didn't really start like going crazy with the whole walking thing until I actually got an internship in Germany in 2020. And I remember talking with the HR before I got there, and they said, "Yeah, you kind of need a car to get to work." I said, "No, fuck you, challenge accepted." Immediately, because, by this point, I'd already started to take, I'd been to Europe a few times. I'd started dating someone from there, from Germany, and I took a look at Google Maps and I was like, okay, can I get to this office without a car? And the answer turned out to be yeah. It was about a 30-minute bus ride from the center city where I'd gotten my Airbnb to the office on the outskirts. Honestly, it was pretty great. A bus came roughly every 10 to 20 minutes. I didn't have to transfer, I didn't have to change. Like, that was my bus, and that blew my fucking mind. I could just get on a bus and just go. I mean, I stepped out of my front door. It was a 1.5 minute walk to my bus stop. I got off the stop outside of my work, and it was maybe a 4 minute walk to the front door to our office. That happened also for me, like at around the same time that not just bikes and Jason was putting out his videos. Those videos that were pretty influential to me. I mean, they kind of set me down this whole path of being interested in urbanism. I don't know if that's a similar story for you.
Yeah, I'd like to say it's probably because I went and lived in Newark during college. The being in a city for the first time in my life, not like first time in a city, but like first time really being in a city, not just like visiting for a few hours.
Yeah, yeah, I know
And
exactly what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, it was like you walk over and like you hop on a train and you're in a different place. Every single inch of the city, there's something to see.
Yeah. No, seriously. It's a really lovely experience. The first time that you get to know a city. You're right. Like Boston was my home city growing up, and but it's never a place where I went to a lot because I mean it was really a special thing if we went to Boston, and all of those experiences as a kid going to Boston were great. I mean, except for the fact that we almost always drove unless little train nerd Nick nagged the parents to take down Easter. It wasn't until I got older and I actually started spending time in the place on my own, going when I wanted to, where I wanted to, that I started to really like fall in love with cities and that city.
You never really get the experience of like 1 o'clock in the morning. I need to go like buy like a microwave bean burrito, and like you just walk out of your place, and 2 blocks away there's the place that sells the microwave bean burrito, and you're fully sated in the middle of the night. Like that experience is not something you get in the suburbs, and it's not something you know you needed until you're in the city.
I know. So let me tell you the German version of that story, which is it's midnight and I need Döner, which is for the unenlightened. I don't. Have you ever heard of Döner or
No, this
donor,
is
as we'd
magic.
say?
Oh
Yes.
yeah, yeah. That I know. It's like a sandwich thingy.
I'm so happy that I said donor and you understood me. Um, so
Wait,
yeah. So
I went to Berlin and I didn't have any Duna, and I went to Toronto. I went to Tirana and I had some Duna.
oh God. All right. You know what? We'll get you there on the pronunciation. I promise. Döner is actually a Turkish food, and it's similar to shawarma, but it's basically roasted meat on a stick that's been roasting for hours, and then they slice it off, they shave it off, put it on bread, vegetables, sauce, cabbage, and then that's it. It's like the perfect drunk food. It really really is. So I was so fucking lucky in the Airbnb I stayed in the city. This was Bonn, by the way. And for anybody who knows Bonn, it's the former capital of West Germany. and I lived in Adenauer Platz. But anyways, and it was just amazing for me to like live above this place. I could just wander downstairs in my sweatpants, and I was like at a restaurant. I didn't have to get in my car and drive 15 minutes to the hot dog place.
Or to order Domino's, which that's kind of all you're really left with is Chinese food and Domino's when you're in the suburbs.
Chinese food, Domino's, if you're lucky, Thai food or Mexican, or some other chain. You know, it's funny in New England we're even more fucked or cucked or whatever than the rest of you guys, because what we have for fast food is the following: McDonald's, Subway, Dunkin' Donuts, and that's pretty much it. There's not like anything else. Yeah.
Which are all ostensibly just like breakfast and lunch. Like, do you guys not eat dinner, like fast food dinner?
No, we don't. Okay, we do have Five Guys, so apparently that's your only option. Honestly, yeah, growing up, fast food was not a major part of my life. Even though driving like almost everywhere was, fast food wasn't, which is kind of weird, right? Like it feels like they go together, but yeah, we just didn't have a ton of different options. And it's not even like we had local replacements, unless you count Dunkin' Donuts. And oh yeah, I forgot about Starbucks. Okay, yeah, yeah. Shoot me. But for dinner, we went out to like local places. My part of New England, that's not everywhere in New England, but my part of New England had a lot of local options. We've talked about Portsmouth, and Portsmouth is a town of 20,000 people, 10 minutes from the town I grew up in, that has, oh, I would have to say somewhere between 30 and 50 restaurants, bars, clubs. I mean, it's really incredible the density of fun shit to do in that really walkable town. So yeah, we fast food could not compete with the local offerings.
That's like shit. Well, you'll always get like in a lot of places in New Jersey and stuff like that. Like you'll get a Shake Shack in the places where the normal chains could not compete. Actually, Taco Bell, surprisingly, like Taco Bell is one of the few things that will survive any sort of like competition.
Yeah, and that's really funny because all of our Taco Bells closed. We had like two when I was growing up, and then that went down to like zero. The closest KFC to my house is over 20 minutes. The closest Taco Bell was over 20 minutes. Nearest Chick-fil-A was well over an hour. There is no Popeyes. There's no Shake Shack. There's no Mighty Taco for you people from Buffalo out there. But yeah.
No, my taco for me either. So what is it like living car free in Europe? Obviously, your experiences are more of the interesting ones. I kind of already know. Yeah, most people have the lived experience of American infrastructure, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, no. So I think to kind of address that question, it's interesting because there's a lot of people who are in the urbanist sphere that think Europe is perfect, or that every country in Europe is the same, that we have it all figured out. That's not true. But that said, the experience here is ostensibly better than what I had growing up. I can speak to that. And it's ostensibly much better than what I've heard a lot of other people in the US talk about. So the first time I actually really lived over here, that was 2020, during the pandemic. That was for the small amount of time before I got home officed. That was walking and busing to work. And then that came back after the pandemic had mostly gone to bed. But that was really amazing. That was an awesome experience, just being able to get on the bus and take it to work. The other part of that was that I didn't really mention is when I wasn't going to work, I was just walking everywhere. I mean, and I think that was actually the secret to the losing of the weight, because I did lose, I lost over, I think, almost 50 pounds in that 6 to 7 month period. Yeah, I went from about 230 or so shortly before I arrived to I think like 170, which was a little bit underweight. I'm pretty tall. But I was walking everywhere in that city, and there's not too many people that are going to watch this that know Bonn, but there's Adenauer Platz, where I was living in Boyel. DHL, Deutsche Post, is headquartered in Bonn, and they have a huge skyscraper. And one night, the sun was up super late in the summer, and I said, fuck it. I am going to beat my walking records. I am going to walk to the Post Tower. I think I ended up walking somewhere between 5 and 10 kilometers that night. I left like right after work, had some dinner or some leftovers, and I just walked. I walked across the Rhine. I walked through, I think either down on the river or through the old city. I made it to the post tower, and I was there, and it was beautiful. And it was wonderful, and it just totally blew my mind that I was able to do that. And I know that'll sound really dumb to a lot of people, but I can't believe I could walk that far and arrive at a place. That's part one. That's the walking. Second thing, and this is a little bit briefer because my experience is shorter with it, but the biking. I made a YouTube video about this over the summer, and I bought kind of influenced from YouTube. I bought a bike upon moving to Germany because I said this time is going to be really different. I love walking, but the place where I was living at the time in Bavaria wasn't so. See, this is where you see that things are not perfect. A lot of things were still really far apart there. The major flaw with the town we were living in, all of the supermarkets, which this is not normal in Europe, all of the supermarkets were in a development like probably a 20 to 30 minute walk west of where we were living. And we were like right next to the downtown. We were a 5 minute walk from the downtown. It made it so that almost everybody had to drive to these supermarkets, which had huge parking lots. There's stroads, multi-lane streets over there. And like there are 5 supermarkets, but they were all far away. So I said, okay, I'm buying this bike. It's a cheap piece of crap. I probably should have bought a new one. I bought it for €100 from a Russian guy in a parking lot, fixed up the bike, and that is now how I get to work. Yeah, I don't know. Tell me about it in the US because I'm actually a little bit curious because you seem to bike and walk a decent amount where you're living, and I'm a little bit surprised that that's possible.
Yeah, so I have like these multi-part experiences, but like where I am right now, I've moved out roughly to the suburbs because I spent a lot of time on the road. So I went to like 9 different cities between the US and Canada. So I also biked in every single one of those cities too. So I kind of collected some experiences. But here in the New Jersey suburbs, it's like not too bad, but everything is like a good segment of not too bad, and then you hit these like giant multi-lane highways with no side with like no like provision for crossing. So you're always going to be playing Frogger if you want to go more than a few miles in
Yeah.
in New Jersey. So it's like good Frogger. But like
Oh God.
I was recently going to like I was like, oh, I want to go to the CVS, which is just like a pharmacy or whatever. Hopped on my bike, went down the road, beautiful road, cliffside kind of road, kind of nice. I guess we don't really have cliffs in New Jersey, but
I was
we
gonna
went.
say
Yeah,
you can't fool me. My dad's from New Jersey. I know what you're talking about, but go ahead.
it's hilly. And then I got there and it was all nice. And I was like, if I had to go across the street for this place, I wouldn't have been able to go because it was a 5 lane highway and there's no walk signal. And the number of people who turn on like any sort of signal, like there's just no time to go. It would be just completely unsafe. So it's a lot of times you're stuck in situations like that. But I still am able to get to the grocery store. Like this is I guess what you almost all the town is single detached homes that are on like 1/8 acre lots, except for the downtown, which is all 3 or 4 story apartment buildings. It's not a place where like there's a ton of amenities around, but I'm still able to get to the grocery store.
Okay. Yeah, that's great, honestly. That's about what I think I was kind of expecting because it like even places where you're able to walk and bike in the US are never going to be perfect. Also, you also had said to me that you've fallen off your bike or quite a few times. I don't know if you have some stories you might like to share.
Yeah, so I guess one of the best ones is I was on the West Side Bike Trail. So on in Manhattan, it's an island. On the west side is when you're on the Hudson River.
Sorry,
um,
sorry. Good.
I'm sorry, I'm New Jersey
I know, man.
splaining.
Look, I've seen West Side Story. I know Manhattan's an island. Okay, they sing about it. Blah blah blah. Yeah, go ahead. Anyways,
Wow. Uh, on the west side, there's a decent bike path, but it is only like two bikes wide, and it is a northbound and a southbound, and it's only two bikes wide. I was ripping down the path. I was probably going like 15 miles an hour, which is, I guess, not too fast. And this person, like, I couldn't. They have these concrete barriers at every entrance because there was like a terrorist attack at one point. Someone ran over a bunch of cyclists. Um,
Jesus fucking Christ.
yeah,
Could you imagine if, okay, people, viewers in Germany and maybe even the Netherlands especially, could you imagine every bike lane or cycle track being protected against terrorists?
yeah. I mean, this is how we get our freedoms is through giant concrete barriers.
Yes,
Uh,
Jersey barriers
Jersey
specifically, yes.
barriers, and
Yeah.
I was just flying down, and this there's a giant multi-use like park on the water side, and this bisects the water side and the highway. So I'm going down, and I didn't see anything, and a child comes running out like full speed in front of
Oh
me,
God, no.
and I saw him, and I grabbed both my brakes full strength, and I went
Oh,
ass over tea kettle. I flew over this kid because I instantly stopped. I guess I don't know why my tires didn't even skid. I just instantly stopped, flew over this child, tucked and rolled, and was laying on the ground in the
oh
middle
my
of.
God. That sounds like something from a sitcom. I'm picturing you like in slow motion, supermaning over this child with like a shit-eating grin on his face.
Oh yeah. Like just like
Yeah.
flying over this toddler, I probably was like only a few inches above him because it's not like
Jesus
I'm not
Christ.
I can't fly. But anyway, I was laying on the ground there, and people were just like watching me. They're just like, yeah, it's like watching me lay on the ground. And
That happens.
the lady with the kid, like she just upped and left, and I'm like,
Oh
she didn't.
my God. Jesus. Oh my God. That's
So
terrible. That's terrible. That's fucking awful. Like she just left. You could have been. I don't know. Your spleen could have come out of your anus or something, and she wouldn't have known. You could have died.
well, the most likely thing was I broke my collarbone and wasn't going to be moving from that spot because the way I landed,
Oh.
I did tuck and roll, but I hit the back of my head because I was rolling forward and I landed kind of fairly heavily on my shoulder, but not like, but like the big thing was is right after that I I tried to get up and ride my bike away. Both my back rotor, my back brake rotor, and
Yeah.
my back derailleur both were completely out of alignment. So
Oh.
I had to walk to the train station, which was like a half a mile away.
Wow. That is an exceptionally shitty day for you. I'm sorry. That's terrible. And that's not even that's with good bike infrastructure. That's just bad parenting.
The big thing is that that concrete barrier shouldn't have been there. If that
Yeah.
concrete barrier wasn't there, I would have saw that kid.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, were you wearing a helmet?
I ever since I started biking in the city, I wore a helmet. Like whenever I was in the suburbs or wherever, I'll usually not, but
Yeah, which is funny because I actually feel like you're probably at more risk from like getting hit by a car or something in the suburbs. But yeah, no, because like I actually just bought a helmet. I think it must have been about 2 weekends ago. For me, it was like I realized how much more I was going to be biking, and I kind of like the statistics of it hit me. I was like, the one thing that people, when they're talking about helmets, don't really talk about is the fact that a lot of the times, and your story just kind of proved that for me, that you need a helmet. It's not because the car is hitting you, it's because you're falling off your bike for any reason. There's so many other things to hit out there besides a car. And honestly, asphalt is a lot harder than aluminum sheet metal.
falling on the hood of a car can be not bad. falling on the ground is almost always bad.
Why do I feel like you have experience with that? The way that you said that, I don't know.
So I haven't actually. I've never been hit head on by a car.
Okay.
Um, I've been clipped by mirrors a few times. By a few,
Okay.
I mean two times. Once he hit a person while I was parked at the intersection. A person flew by me going around a tight turn. They clipped my handlebars and they even bent my handlebars a little bit. I've gone through a little bit of equipment. Bent my
I was
handlebars a
gonna
little bit.
say,
It pushed me
I
into
was gonna
another
say,
car.
what number bike are you on, and what number set of handlebars?
I still use the one with the bent handlebars.
Okay.
I and the rotor I bent back in place and it doesn't really work fully. And the derailleur I bent back into place and doesn't really work fully. So
All right. Well, let's hope this podcast goes somewhere, and then maybe you'll have the budget for a new bike, or at least repairs. So I am honestly just very defensive in my biking. I mean, I bike like really fast, like terrifyingly fast. Ever since something happened this summer where I kind of was aggressively biking down the sidewalk, and my significant other was biking with me. This car like didn't see me and almost accelerated into me out of the parking lot. This is where all the supermarkets were. And then the woman got out and started screaming at me in German. And I didn't understand what she was saying. I just kept, I don't know. And my wife was yelling at her back. And afterwards, my wife was like, yeah, she's like complaining that she has cancer and she doesn't deserve this because she has cancer and something like that. And I feel bad for this woman, but she was really screaming at me. And after that, I've been a little bit more careful because it probably would have been. I probably did speed up a little bit. Let's be real here. I was just annoyed that she wasn't looking before she pulled out of the parking lot.
man, just wait until I have my old ladies yelling at me story.
Oh God, yeah, we'll have to save that for later. So,
So there's a lot of things that people think that like, oh, you need a large truck or like you need like some sort of trailer or something to do where they're like, oh, yeah, there's no way you can do this unless you have some sort of massive vehicle. And one of those things is sailing. And I've gotten
oh,
pretty big into sailing recently.
oh, so you sail as well,
You
really?
sail, yeah?
Yeah. Well,
Ah.
I haven't. It's been a few years, but yes, I sail.
Yeah, well, I moved to a place on the bay here and I've gotten super into it. But the big thing was I kind of didn't want to get a large vehicle. I do have a vehicle. I do have that concession. I live in the suburbs. Sorry, I need a vehicle.
It's okay. I have a car. It's chilling in the U.S., but it's not with me. So yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, mine lives in the parking lot like 5 or 6 days a week. But I found a roof toppable sailboat. So it has two pontoons. It's actually made in it's either made in Germany or Austria, and
Sounds
it's
about
called
right.
it's called the X Cat, and it's made for their tiny little German cars. And you have the two pontoons. You put that on the roof. You have the all of the other gear, and you put that on the roof. And it's like you can take it wherever you want. But the big thing about that is like when you say sailboat, someone's like, "Oh, you're going to be pulling a trailer." It's like, no, I've never owned a trailer in my life.
No, no, that's awesome. No, that's a cool. So is it like the catamaran one, or is it a proper like halt boat?
So it's a catamaran. Yeah, it's dual hulls.
Okay, yeah. Oh my God, that is super cool. Yeah, no, I am so sick of all the stuff that people feel like they need a pickup truck for. That is like a perfect. If you can put a fucking sailboat on the roof of an X3, then my God, you can move almost anything without a pickup truck.
So the reason I actually wanted to get an even smaller car was because I wanted to buy a travel trailer, and people were like, okay, well, you need a big truck for a travel trailer. They sell fiberglass travel trailers, which even they sold them since like the 70s, back when your car only had like it was a natural aspirated V6 with 120 horsepower or whatever. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
basically nothing. Like people were pulling these with those
Oh my
trailers.
God. Well, like if I can say from over here, I have seen Germans, especially, but people in Europe love to attach trailers to cars that it looks kind of ridiculous. Imagine in the US if somebody was driving like a Mercedes E-Class station wagon with a trailer on it. And I've seen like a lot of that here. It's funny because I don't even think I've seen those with hitch. I don't even know where the hitch is on that. If I'm thinking about it right now, I have no idea how it's attached. Yeah, it's really, really common that people have like X series stuff with trailers here.
Yeah, they sell. So there's this thing called like it's like a hideaway hitch or whatever.
Uh,
You can take it off the car, and then it looks like you don't have a hitch on your car anymore.
okay. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, and it's like, I mean, what else? Okay, what else do people say that you need a truck for? Okay, there's mattresses. Mattresses are tough. It
You get those
depends though.
box mattresses. You can get. We bought a box mattress when we for our place.
Oh my God. Okay, so my wife's dad is actually a mattress maker. That's a possible future episode. Things that still exist in Germany and Europe that don't exist in the U.S. anymore. He's delivering like lots of mattresses, so he has a van. But I definitely feel like it's possible to put most things on a roof. Honestly, Thule Thule roof racks. That's the answer to
Yep.
everything, apparently.
Or if you have a really my Buick LeSabre, that shitty little Buick LeSabre, I carried 7 pieces of 2x4, not seven, 7 pieces of what are they called, sheet plywood, quarter-inch sheet plywood on that thing,
Oh,
and all I did
oh
was
God.
I ratcheted strapped it down from through the windows.
Oh my God, I just thought of something. So that BMW I was telling you about that the shit one was that I bought in Arizona, anyways, is a convertible.
Mhm.
And I have moved quite a few things in that car with the top down, sticking like straight out. Garbage bins. Oh my God, I'm pretty sure I've moved like wooden planks or boards of some kind in there. I mean, all right, that's the second answer. Answer one, Thule rack. Answer two, Buick LeSabre. Answer three, convertible with the top down. That's it.
Exactly.
That's all you need. Well, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, that was a podcast, and we're just still kind of finding our groove, figuring out how to do this thing, and
I think we're perfect already. I don't think we should ever
perfect.
improve.
Never improve. Okay, good. Let's just take the American way of doing things and just take it to the max. Never change anything.
You're gonna get 100 more of these, and they're never gonna get any better.
Never any better. Never any editing. Never any improvement in my internet connection. All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.